Hi. We live in a world where everyone wants the moon and the stars. And in that same world, can you even imagine a mother who just longs for that day when her child would be able to call her mom, who prays for one single happy, connected look from her child, who celebrates with such enthusiasm every time her son is able to follow a simple command? Something as simple as, come here. Can you imagine a father who has realized that he needs to be able to strike that perfect balance between work and family, who knows that his child's well-being and happiness are far more important than the marks that he's getting in school? Who are these people? What has taught them the value of things that most of us struggle all our lives to get? What kind of a family is this that is celebrating such ordinary things? Chances are that this family has a child with autism. Their definition of ordinary is not like yours. Their hopes and dreams and celebrations are sometimes so simple that they might even appear unusual. ASD, or autism spectrum disorder, is a neurodevelopmental disorder that wires the brain differently. Autistic people register things, process them, and respond to them at rates and styles that are somewhat different from non-autistic individuals. However, very contrary to popular belief, they are not the proverbial lost boys, but rather Peter Pans with a slightly quirky take on life. And that label is just that. It doesn't define who these children are in the inside or what their potential is. So I'm a doctor, but I'm not an autism specialist. And how do I know all this? My son was born at 36 weeks, a little premature. And for a long time, I chalked down a lot of his delayed and aberrant milestones to this prematurity. He was a fussy, irritable child with erratic sleeping patterns who would look at shiny things on the wall for hours on end. He was a little less connected with us. And I remember the first time that he laughed out loud. It was a priceless moment. It wasn't until he was almost 6 months old. Whenever I called out to him, he would hardly ever look towards me, busy in his own world. The dances that he absolutely loved to watch on the computer, he would just hop to them, jump to them, unable to copy a single step. Around the time that he was almost 2, I remember asking another child, "Where's your father?" And trust me, I wasn't expecting that he would answer me, because had my son been asked the same question, he wouldn't have been able to answer. But pat came the reply. The kid said, "My father's home." And I was surprised but not very worried. So I casually went home and Googled, how many words does a 2-year-old have? It was then that everything changed for us. I found out that a 2-year-old is supposed to have nearly 50 words and a few meaningful phrases, and my son, he had a maximum of 10 very sporadic words. And some of them he had even started forgetting. I also realized that this delayed speech, along with lack of eye contact and name response, all of which my son was manifesting, were all red flags for a neurodevelopmental delay. We rushed to the developmental pediatrician. And there, after observing my son for almost 5 hours and asking us endless questions, she closed the file in which she had been writing and wrote on top with absolute finality, ASD with regression. Because all the time that he was there in her office, he wasn't able to sit still, continued pacing and putting things in his mouth. She asked me at one point, can you make him look at you? And I remember my heart beginning to beat because I knew I could not make my son look at me. He used to adore bubbles, and when she placed those bubbles on the top shelf, he neither asked for them, nor looked at me for them, nor did he point to them. And this failure of pointing might seem like something so simple, but it is a sign of non-verbal communication, something else which was missing in my son. So, in that moment when she gave a name to all the things my son was doing, not doing, I floated out of my body. And I remember asking her a single question, do you think my son will be able to live a functional life? And she replied to me very vehemently and very aggressively, you will have to start therapies immediately, or he will get worse. Now, just to be clear here, we don't have many medicines for autism. Just some therapies that are able to take care of some of the symptoms and behaviors, but there's nothing curative. And this is not an answer that any parent wants to hear. I am a doctor. I wished hard that I could pop him a pill and take this all away. It was as if I had lost him. I mourned all the times that perhaps we would never have. And that word regression, it kept on repeating in my mind. Had I done this to him? I felt like shouting at the universe. What did I do to deserve this never-ending struggle? Why had God given me a child who wasn't able to show me he loved me? So that's gotten a little bit heavy around there, and I'd like to change the track just a little bit, because that, my friends, is just the beginning of our story. And like we call it here in Bollywood, picture abhi baki hai mere dost. Because we have a lot more left to this story. Although we don't have many medicines that treat autism, we do have some wonderfully targeted therapies. And with the support of my friends, family, and community, today my child is a happy, connected child. To the extent that you will not be able to believe our early challenges. Days when every minute of every hour was accounted for. Time that I would allow him to do his version of play, and time that I would teach him how not to just line up cars, but to place them in the garage. How he could play with friends, how to follow rules, how to do sharing, how to do turn-taking activities. You will not be able to make out any gross issues with him today, but there have been times when I have been bone tired for days on end. His inability to comprehend simple things, taking away every ounce of my physical and mental reserve. He was unable to understand the concept of passage of time, and he would have severe tantrums. So we had a calendar stuck on the wall. He would get up in the morning, circle the current date, and cut it out at night. Slowly he has understood the concept of morning, evening, night, and it has taken a long time for the peace to return to my household. If you talk to my friends, they'll tell you my son is a storyteller. He has that much language today. But he's still unable to understand the language of emotions. Why do people cry sometimes even when they're happy? And why can you not just go on and tell a fat person you're fat? Which he did on one occasion, and then I had to go and give this lady endless explanations. Autism parents have to do that quite often, and then we learn to play the autism card, which is frankly quite a relief. Rather than somebody coming and telling me, oh, you're a bad mom, and your son is a brat. So we continue to struggle to make him independent every day, to make him understand the concept of empathy, to make him understand the complexity of the English language. There are chances that when he grows up and his girlfriend, hopefully if he has one, calls him hot, he might just go run and check his temperature and take a paracetamol. You know why? Because he understands things literally. But despite all that, There are certain moments in our life that are so transcendent and uplifting that we forget everything else. Every time he draws a sun peeping out of the mountains, which all our children draw with so much ease, I preserve it and display it proudly in my drawing room as a masterpiece. I know his imagination is a priceless thing. Every time he bends down to tie his shoelaces, I just stop and take in that moment with such pride and awe. From the child for whom language and communication were like rocket science, to a child who, cool as a cucumber, came up to me and told me that, Mama, do you know, there are people who are not very nice to me when you're not there, but they're much better to me when you're around. Is it because they want to please you? Our life as a family is full of eternal wonders, and we wake up excited every morning to learn what new worlds he's going to show us today. And as a family, we are less critical, more indulgent, more productive, more focused, more balanced, and because we did not break and persevered, stronger than before. However, not all families survive. 70% of mothers of autistic children are severely depressed, and it is not just worry for their child's future. It is having to live a life much harder than others, of having to be in the spotlight all the time. Because human nature being what it is, we do tend to look at differences with more criticism than frank curiosity. So if friends and family of a newly diagnosed parent come up to them and say, okay, I get you, tell me what you need, it brings them much closer to accepting the diagnosis rather than being awed and awkward around them. And you know, there's a wonderful scientific basis behind it. It's called neuroplasticity, which is the ability of the brain to adapt and accommodate to early experiences. So now do you get how important it is, not only for the family, but the community to accept and move on, so that therapies can be put into place and a better outcome expected. I remember I had this cousin in Delhi who would just call me up sometimes and I would air to her my feelings, my struggles. And at other times, we would just talk about the current gossip. And that made me feel a sense of regularity, normalcy, of still being a part of this world. Early intervention in the form of play therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, special education is an endless round of therapies. But you know what the best thing is? That if ever there was a diagnosis that needed a tribe of friends, family, professionals as saviors, working and supportive partners, it is this diagnosis. The tribe that can create an early intervention environment. So when you meet the children, do get down to their eye level and say hello. Practice with them the questions they have been learning in class. What is your name? Wait for them to respond and applaud them enthusiastically when they do that. Every person who comes in contact with these children needs to get inside that bubble, engage with them and bring them out of it. They will not be able to come out otherwise. And the comprehensiveness and totality of exposure and engagement that is needed is not possible by the family alone. We require a community for that. Can you imagine the frustration of parents for whose children play is work? Trust me, a simple game of catch on an evening when the child's parents are too exhausted to do it can give them a couple of hours of me time, knowing that their child is being looked after the same way they would have. Sensory challenges make these children rock and flap and do certain things that might seem odd and uncomfortable and unacceptable to you. But please understand that they need to do all that to organize their senses. Because everything, normal sights, sounds, smells, the unpredictability of time, place and person, everything overwhelms them. How can you shun people who are engaging in certain behaviors to be able to function appropriately? Teach your children to respect diversity. Your genuine friendship will ensure a constantly worried family that there is a community which will be there even when they are not, that there are people who will be able to look at this child's strengths rather than just be obsessed with his limitations. His brilliant purity and honesty of heart, a heart that is completely devoid of malice, manipulations, and artifice. A rare thing indeed. To teach a child on the spectrum something as simple as putting a pencil in a slot, we require several repetitions and several novel and reinforcing ideas. I remember my son wasn't able to identify colors till he was about 4. And then suddenly, one day, he saw a lady in a pink uniform driving a pink auto. And all that pink kind of triggered something in his mind, and the next day he knew all his colors. So that is how engaging and comprehensive the therapy needs to be, which again is just possible if everyone creates an environment. I just hope schools were able to adapt inclusion more in practice than just in theory. And can you imagine the relief of parents who knew that if they equipped their child well with all the tools necessary to get a job, he would get a job and not just be ostracized for his limitations? Most parents, most of us have this worry, most autistic parents. What after me? If only employers were able to realize that autistic people make hardworking, dedicated, determined employees. And the best thing is they are not going to get bored as easily as their other employees because they prefer sameness, they prefer predictability, they thrive in it. And yes, they have challenges and they will always require adaptations made for those challenges. But they do have strengths, and guess who else has strengths and challenges and needs adaptations made for them? I do, and you do too. So, essentially, we are all different, but still the same. I have answers to all my questions today. Why God gave me a child who was not able to show me that he loved me, so I could show everyone else how to love him, how to love all these children, how I could make myself a better person, free myself from so many pointless heartaches. Acceptance and support of my community who accepted me unconditionally has brought us to this point. I hope you're able to see that and free yourself from the expectations, from the shackles of regularity and normalcy, and become a better and involved society, accepting neurodiversity fully and understanding that different is different. It might feel different, it might look different, it is not less. Everyone wants to be someone's sun and light up their lives. Why not try to be someone's moon and light up their darkness and change the colloquy? Thank you.